That was lovely. Thanks. There you go. And thank you, gentlemen, as well. That was smashing. And interestingly, you made your first performance in opera, didn't you?
Yeah, that's a long time ago, but that was the first time that I ever sang on a stage.
What was that?
Professionally, for money, anyway. It was La Bohème by Puccini. And the reason it came about was because my school, based in Sussex, one of the ladies on the Board of Governors was Mrs. Christie. So whilst they would normally only audition prep schools, we got the chance to go through the audition rounds as well. And I was lucky enough to get on there.
And what part did you play?
Just a little street vendor running around in the second act. I don't know if you're familiar with the opera, but there's a toy seller called Papagnon.
Oh, yes.
Yes, opera buffs everybody, I suppose.
On my cuff there.
But I just used to, I just had to run around the stage pretending to sell sweets or whatever.
And you got paid?
Yes,
how much?
£3 a night.
And as many sweets as you could eat?
Yes, it was funny because we used to speak in a normal kind of Sussex way, and the other people in the chorus, the other children in the chorus were from very well-to-do prep schools. And I remember their headmaster saying, offering the comprehensive people, would you like a Mars bar? And we just used to always think, Mars bar, ooh, great. And the way he used to pronounce it was very strange. But so we had many Mars bars and many Coca-Colas and £3 a night.
Sounds good.
It was good for a 13-year-old. Brilliant.
What was your first appearance, Michael?
My first appearance on the stage was the end of the pier at Cromer when I was about 5 years old, and I'd gone along to see a magician. It was a matinee performance, and there weren't many people there, really, mainly me and my mother. So when you asked for volunteers, I just got there ahead of my mother. And, we had a glamorous assistant who was handing out sort of rings, and then he would be blindfolded, and he'd put all the rings together, and then he'd loosen them all. So I was given the job of being the assistant, and he was blindfolded, and
so you had to do
I had to hand in the rings, but I did a bit of, like, I'd seen the assistant doing it, a bit of fiddling around before giving it to him. After about the third one, he leaned across to me and said, "For God's sake, stop mucking about." That was the end, almost the end of my career. Deeply, deeply disillusioned.
I was talking to Michael earlier about ancestors, of course, but you know nothing about yours, do you?
Nothing. I mean, I know the Jameses, Mr. and Mrs. James, who are my adoptive parents. But no, I've never met my real ones. And I've come to the stage now in my life where I really don't have an interest in meeting them. And there was a time, probably around the age of 21, where, you know, you always go through a time when you feel as though you need to understand where you come from and identify yourself with. And I went through that stage where I thought it might be good for me to know what my mother looked like or whatever, or what their personalities were like. And I worked towards this, and then on the crunch, then when it really became almost a reality of where people around me were saying, right, if you want to do it, you can, because we have the resources to be able to bring you together now. And I remember we were on tour, and I remember lying in the hotel thinking, do I really want to come face to face with my makers, if you like, after 25 years or 24 years of just being Wendy, who's come from I don't know where. I like to feel, and I kind of started thinking though I created myself, because you can't put any of yourself onto your parents, and I was just an individual by that, and I just decided then, no, I'd really rather not meet them. And also from meeting my friends, just from talking to my friends, who 9 out of 10 of them grew up with their natural parents, and still a lot of them going into mid-30s, a lot of them are still so under the guilt trip that parents lay on you, and that's their natural parents, that I thought maybe I don't need this in my life anymore.
Well, you've rationalised it pretty well.
Yes, sometimes I wonder whether I've rationalised it almost too much so that there is no emotion.
You know something about the nationality, don't you?
Well, my mother was Norwegian. She was over here learning English, and she got knocked up, and she had to delay her homecoming for an extra 9 months. And she gave birth to me. I don't even know the name of my father. But so I presume she's somewhere in Norway with a legitimate family of her own, and I don't know about him.
You could go with Michael and discover your homeland as well, if you want.
Well, let's do that. That's a jolly good idea. I told you, fix us up if you go on the programme. It's LWT computer dating.
You have been around. I mean, you've been to Eastern Europe, and are they really taken with rock and roll now?
Well, so much has been happening over there lately that they're actually far more enthusiastic about all the mod cons than people in Western Europe, maybe. The most notable thing about going to Poland, which is when I did go there, it was the 10th anniversary of the first Solidarity meeting. And it was so funny because during the day, my bass player and I would just got in a little old taxi and driven around Gdansk, and we'd stopped outside Lech Walensa's house with our cameras like real American tourists, and we're clicking away so we could come home and say, oh, we saw where he lives. And then later on in that evening, when we were doing this festival, he turned up, and I met him and I met his wife, and it only really hit me on the airplane on the way home that you can meet a dozen pop stars and, you know, other famous pop stars, and it's just like, they're just like me. But to actually meet somebody that has changed the course of world history, it really is quite a bonus.
You didn't just meet him, you actually sort of got on down with him, didn't you?
Got on down. Well, he had a groove at our gig, definitely. And I mean, I'd had a little bit to drink that evening. So in between the songs, I was doing a bit of a world peace kind of stance. And I'm sure none of the Polish people understood what I was actually saying, but I kept going, do you understand? And Lech was at the front going, yeah. And so, I mean, it was all very rock and roll and things, but it was wonderful, yeah. But another thing I'd like to say, and that is that after having been on world tours, and you probably found this as well, that the countries that haven't had a tremendous amount of oppression and that haven't fought wars on their own soil, they're so cynical and bitter and spoilt almost, they take everything for granted. Whereas you go to a country like Poland, and through the media we here would presume, oh, it's a really depressing country, they're all lining up in food queues. And they are some of the most generous kind. They'd give you their last everything. They'd take you in. And because they've been shunted about through politics and oppressed awfully through so many years, and they've had to knuckle under, you know, and really survive, the way they behave is so generous and loving. Countries that haven't gone through this, they're so, oh, gee, we can have everything we want. And it's a really interesting...
I mean, I really agree, because I found on going around the world that the people who had least gave you most and were the most generous, unstintingly generous. I mean, the people we went on the Dow with, I mean, they had nothing. They paid £30 for a journey there and back, which was sort of 3 weeks. And they shared absolutely everything with us. So that's the way it is, yeah.
It is the way it is.
Let me ask you about the group. Now, nothing surprises these days, but is there a story behind the choice of Transvision Vamp?
Well, to many journalists, I've analysed the name, but the truth is Nick and I, Nick the guitarist, the songwriter, he and I just had to come up with a name. It's very difficult, actually, finding an original name that doesn't sound stupid. But then you think about Sting, and if a bloke walked up to you in the street and said, oh, from now on I'm going to call myself Sting, you'd say, what a stupid name. But actually, once you have an image around yourself and you've proved your work worthwhile, any name can take on its own credibility. So we just chose Trans all across the world, Vision, we're aware of what's going on, Vamp, let's put some vamping and, you know, vamp things up slightly.
But Michael, talking about bands and interesting names, you can come up with an equally interesting one, can't you? Your son's band.
Well, my son had a band. It's sort of around at the moment. You know, they're waiting for the big break. I mean, they're in the garage, in the car, with the engine running. And their band's called Bob Gone Crazy, which is...
Is that a reference to Dylan?
I don't think so, no. That's too literal. You got me there. Because Transvision Vamp means something, you know. Let's not psychoanalyze this. No, I'm not sure. No, I don't think it is. I don't think my son is a great Dylan
How
fan.
old is he?
It's just Bob, probably Bob down the chemist, it is. He has unfortunately gone crazy, but he is at the chemist, so he's plenty to take for it.
So your son's, what, 43 now? And he's,
my son's, oh, he's older than me. Quite extraordinary. He's in the Guinness Book of Records. He's 22 and is aspiring. But
and are you encouraging him? Are you encouraging him?
Oh, yeah. I mean, one thing I always regretted I could never do was play an instrument, and I love music and listening to music. So, and he has got a talent. It's just taking a while to get the break.
Which instrument does he play?
Well, he learnt the saxophone, and now he plays keyboards, which seems to be the instrument which you can compose on. He's writing music as well. So, yes, I mean, I'm prepared to wait, but it's a hard slog. But I say, well, at 22, I wasn't doing anything very much.
Of course you were.
Do they get in the transit van and go off gigging and stuff?
Yeah, well, they get in the transit van and then have to get out again and put the wheels back. They've got 3 wheels, they're looking for the 4th. No, they haven't played a lot of gigs. But he does a bit of DJing and all that, and, you know, he plays the music, does the scratching and the wobbling and the... You know.
All that newfangled stuff.
That's great. Yeah.
Yes. Well, now, to call somebody many-faced might sound insulting, but in the case of my next guest, I think it is within the Trades Descriptions Act. Indeed, in her recent television series, About Face, she played a variety of loopy people. She's created a memorable character as British Telecom's Beattie, and she's about to assume the appearance of Joyce Grenfell in another revival of her highly successful show. Ladies and gentlemen, Maureen Lipman. Oh, a bit of exercise, you can't beat it. It occurred to me that the Lipman is an anagram of M. Palin.
Yes. Oh, at last.
They've found us out.
We are the same person.
We are, in fact, the same person.
Well.
I'm starting at the South Pole, and I'm going by pogo stick.
And you'll meet in a lavatory somewhere in there.
It also is, I have to say, a palindromic year. 1991 reads the same backwards as forwards. There's only going to be 3 of those this
Palin palindromic.
Sorry, carry on.
This is better, actually, than the scatological stuff from before, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
You know,
that was disgusting. We'll keep it in, of course. No,
you're in my seat.
Fine. Sorry, no, really.
Too late now. Anyway, you and Michael met a long time ago, I believe.
Yes, we did. I suppose it was about 1966. I was a drama student, and he was very old. And actually, a girl who was in my drama school, Annabel Leventon, was due to be in a review with Michael at Edinburgh, I think it was. We can't remember very well. We've been talking about it back in the hostility room. And anyway, she couldn't go, so I went. And I was in this review with Michael. But I actually can't remember much about it, except one sketch where I had to come on stage and take all my clothes off. Now, as you well know, Michael, people pay me vast fortunes not to take my clothes off. So it was all mimed. So they sung off stage, da 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 dee, and I came on like a real slag and began by I took off the first lot and then the other thing like this, and then I finally got off the bra and everything fell, and and then I ended up with teeth and contact lenses. A lot of that went on, and then wigs and false bits and everything, and then Michael then came on stage. Where I'd left everything on the chair, I went off and said, "Good night, darling," and kissed the chair, you see. It brought the house down, really. No, it was really fabulous.
And then we lost track of it. We went off.
I find that emotionally quite disturbing. You're rejoicing again, aren't you? How many times is that now?
5, if you count the tryout at Farnham, yes. Twice in the West End, and then we took it to America, to a place called the Long Wharf Theatre in Connecticut, which was amazing, because, of course, they'd never heard of me, and they'd never heard of Joyce, really. And, of course, some of the sketches, obviously, I don't do an impersonation of her, because that wouldn't be right, although sort of first memories are of the Centrinians films, you know, and that marvellous sort of Miss Gossage, and all that sort of, I say, 10 days leave for wedding. Commander says you only get spliced once, you might as well enjoy it. Oh, you're postponing our wedding? Well, what am I going to tell the girls? They bought us a toast rack and everything, It's just wonderful observation all the time, and it sort of makes me very happy, which is why, in case you're going to ask, I'm sure you're not, because I'm not going to stop talking for long enough to let you. Which is why I'm doing it again. Thank you.
Let me ask about the aforementioned Beattie. Is Beattie gone forever?
I've hung up my mobile phone forever, yes, I'm afraid. Anyone here who'd like to audition to take over from me, come on.
How did she get the final pips?
Well, they haven't really seen her off in that sense. We just